Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope everybody's doing fantastic after that debacle last night. 123-121 loss in overtime to the Detroit Pistons. I said last night I wanted to get a little into Terry Rozier. It felt like a side route to get to on the show, and a loss like that, Terry Rozier throwing up a 3 for 14 clunker did not feel like the biggest thing in the world to me at that time. But we can get into that now, and certainly it has been a little bit of a cause for concern that Terry Rozier hasn't had one of those electrifying performances so far this season. His season high so far was a 20-point margin. You're getting about 13 points a game from him. And he's shooting 38% from the field. I mean, the Heat have a couple of guys on their roster right now who are not hitting it at a very efficient clip. One of them being their starting point guard, and one of them being Bam Adebayo, who, of course, is now over the 40% mark after yesterday's performance. And thankfully, I do think one of the things that I did like, and I know that there were moments people are pissed at Bam about, but I do feel like I saw Bam Adebayo looked like he was finding his way offensively yesterday. Looked like a guy who was a little more comfortable going to the bag. Looked like a guy who was a little more comfortable in spots and wasn't just being a dunker. So I really do think that Bam's going to come out of this slump. But the question is, with Terry, with Terry Rozier, there's always been this question of, are Terry and Tyler going to work together? Is that going to be a salvageable duo for the Miami Heat? And when is the right time to decide that? Because one thing has been decided, and that is Tyler Herro is one of the team's best players, if not their best player, and he ain't going to the six. He's not going to go into a six-man role. And we talked a little bit about this in the summer, about the possibility of that, because it had been floated out there by Udonis Haslem about the idea of, hey, would the Heat do that? Would they put Duncan Robinson back in the starting lineup? That just felt like the natural place to go, and that's really been squashed because Tyler Herro's been absolutely slaying it, and Terry Rozier hasn't been. But Tyler has found himself in a way where he is just being super efficient. I mean, he's obviously shooting the friggin' lights out right now. Terry Rozier from three is still shooting okay. Last night was not indicative of that. He's 0 for his last 7 from downtown. But, it's the 3 for 14 and trying to find his way elsewhere. Like, there's just been a few too many nights where you look over this road trip, we got 2 for 10, 6 for 13, 4 for 8, and then 3 for 14 the last night. A couple games before that, you had a 4 for 13 in there. You had a 5 for 14 against the Knicks. Open tonight, 5 for 15. Like, there's been a lot of ones where there's been up a lot of shots, and there's not that torrential Terry Rozier streak. Now, this guy is a bit of a streaky player, and there is a feeling, I do think, that the Heat are like, hey, if they like the shots and he's just missing, is he completely nuking everything, or is he just not making shots right now, and will he come out of this? That is one of the things the Heat have to determine before you pull the plug and you're like, we're done with the Terry Rozier thing. Then the question becomes, if he does become your sixth man, are you admitting to a panic trade last year and that it was a complete disaster for you? Because, I'm sure everybody's got the same feelings of, hey, will the Heat possibly make a move? There was a report today from ESPN that they don't see the Heat making a move. It wasn't really, it got one of those things where you got set a notification, but it's kind of a whack-ass report. Like, it said, what's next from it? They were doing a bunch of trade scenarios for some, fringe teams. And it said, Miami came into the season with lots of questions about its future after a middling start to the season, including Jimmy Butler going down with an ankle injury. Those questions remain. Given the extraordinary forgiving nature of the East, don't expect Miami to make any early moves. Entering the season, the Heat wanted to see how their roster would look and evaluate it from there, and that thought process hasn't changed. That is a blur from Tin Bontemps. Well, here's what I would say. The Heat already are dealing with changes because they put Nikola Jovic on the bench. They don't have Jimmy Butler right now. They just got Kevin Love back, and I feel like Kel'el Ware and Pelle Larsson are emerging. That on top of Jaime Jaquez is back from his tummy sickness that he had. It's not like Spo doesn't have parts to play with. Like, if there was nobody else to go to, then I could see this being like, hey, we're just sticking with Terry. And I think for right now, I think the Heat are just going to stick with Terry Rozier. I think that's the way they're going to go. Because there is still a bogged downness of, like, you know, having his... First of all, I don't think that him and Tyler have bad chemistry. I think they look for each other. You saw that in the game time basket last night. Those guys have done a good job of going to the hoop, using their speed, kicking out to each other. Defensively, yeah, he leaves a lot to be desired. That is for sure. But it's hard. It's hard finding two-way guards. It is. It's not an easy route. I am skeptical Spo's going to make a move anytime soon on this. I think that he is going to see this through until not the wheels fall off, but that this is a real slump. Not 10 games. I think we almost got to go twice as many games before Spo pulls the trigger on Terry Rozier, to be honest with you. Like, and it has to be continuous. Because I don't think, like, I think with the difference between him and Nico is Terry's missing shots, but I don't feel like Terry's lost in a bad situation. I think he's just missing shots. Whether you think he's a good enough player or all that, okay, that's a different conversation. I'm just talking about roles. I don't think that he doesn't fit into the role right now. And with Jaime, with Nico, I just felt like the role didn't work for him as a player starting. I just didn't think it worked. Doesn't flourish there. Doesn't, like, Haywood Highsmith, so much better suited. The only downside is he's 6'5", and the other guy's 6'11", but he fits the role a lot better. And I just don't see Eric Spoelstra moving off Terry Rozier quite yet. Then you also have to, they did point this out, and you have to keep this in mind too. They gave up a lot for him. They gave him a first-round pick for him. And that damage is done. You know, you there's no backsies on it. So was it a good trade? Was it a bad trade? I think it was a bit of a panic trade. I think that's fair. I think that they were hoping that, I think the Heat operated last year in a place of hoping they could catch lightning in a bottle. Jimmy would come back. We'd get some actual offense out of the point guard position, and that would help. And obviously, Jimmy got hurt. Terry got hurt. Duncan got hurt. We all know what happened. But was it a bit of a panic move? Absolutely. You know, if the Heat in hindsight, would they have made that trade? I would say probably not. Probably not. But I don't think this is a guy that rats off a ship on by any means. I don't think that we've reached that part of the Terry Rozier era. This is what they write for the Miami Heat's trade. It says the Terry Rozier trade in January plus a roll of what Miami can do over the next 3 months. In addition to taking on a combined $50 million owed to Terry Rozier this season, the Heat send Charlotte a future first-round pick, which is conveyable 2 years after considerations are sent to Oklahoma City. A previous trade has to be met. Miami owes OKC a top 14 protected pick in 2025, which becomes unprotected in 2026 if not conveyed. If that first rounder is conveyed in 25, then Miami will send a top 14 protected pick to 27. If that first is not conveyed, the Hornets will receive a 2028 unprotected first round. The earliest first round of Miami could trade is 2 years after the conditions to Charlotte have been met. The lack of first round capital is a roadblock. The Heat are over the first apron, $1.6 million below the second, and Miami is not allowed to trade Adebayo, Haywood Highsmith, Kevin Love, Alec Burks, or Thomas Bryant. So, yeah, the Heat, in a lot of ways, do need that to work out, unless, you know, a Lillard shakes free and Minnesota just wants to find something cheaper to get things off the books. You need something like that to happen. But, yeah, they do need the Terry thing to work out a little bit. This is not something that it feels like it's got an easy fix right now. And I feel like it's a little too quick to pull the trigger on it yet. If Jimmy comes back and it's still not working out and he's not really finding his shot, his groove with anybody, then do you look into it? Possibly. And if he does, the interesting thing will be if they do decide to pull that trigger, okay, who starts in the backcourt? I saw, do they go Jaime? Do they go Duncan? Do they go J. Rich? That's another question. Is like, okay, so did the Heat go defensive there? And they got their scorers, and this is assuming that Bam Adebayo is like out of his slump. I just don't think there's a decision yet that is so much more obvious to be in a better spot, like the Haywood Nico one was, that you pull that trigger immediately. I'm not sure that's there yet. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on, but I'm just not there yet with benching him.